All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the East Lyme Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, 14th September. The time is 19:03. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Let's first get started with roll call. If we just want to go down the line and say your name.
Nicole Davison.
Richard Gordon.
Michelle Williams.
Kirk Scott.
Lawrence Fitzgerald. Tom Fitting.
Okay, and can everybody hear most of the members? Okay, good, thanks. If everybody would please rise for Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so are there any additions to the agenda this evening, Mr. Gaishel?
I do. I have one. Arthur Carlson, Chairman of the East Lyme Commission for the Conservation of Natural Resources. We discussed the Hathaway property. Request he is here for a short, brief presentation. He can be taken first.
Okay, great. Let's let the record show that Mr. Carlson is going to be on the agenda right before call for public delegation.
Do we need to vote that on?
2/3 vote. Do I hear a motion to add Mr. Carlson to the agenda tonight?
So moved.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Larry. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Let the record show that we are adding Mr. Carlson to the agenda. Mr. Carlson?
Would you give me a hand?
Yes.
That one's going to be the first one. This one right here. Yeah, this one right here. Good evening. Thanks for getting me early. My name's Arthur Carlson. I'm chairman of the Natural Resources Commission, but tonight I'm representing the East Lyme Land Trust. Here to brief you very quickly on a piece of property that the Land Trust has negotiated in the process of securing for the town. It's the so-called Hathaway property. I want to go over all its characters, its characteristics. I'm one of the characters. Its characteristics, and finally, with what I present, ask this commission to write a supporting letter to the Board of Selectmen, suggesting that this is a very important piece of property for the town to own. Let me show where the heck is that one? Oh, it's on the internet here. This piece of property, the Hathaway property, has been first on the list of 65 properties in the POCD. It's been on there for 12 years. I'm going to show, and within that POCD, by the way, well, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You guys wrote it, but the public wanted stands 2-to-1 for more open space in town. We're certainly for that. I want to show you where this is located. And I'm going to do it in terms of the watersheds. This is the 4 Mile River watershed. This is dark blue. This is Bry Brook. This is the Patagonia watershed where this property is located. This is Latimer's Brook, Niantic River. And the point of all this is showing that there's no interchange of the water between watersheds. And we're going to concentrate right now on this watershed because it's about half of our public supply. The other half comes from this. Basically what we're proposing is developing a reservoir system of protected water supply for the future. Actually, this should have been done in 1921, not 2021. It's never too late to play catch-up ball. Hathaway property is right borders Patagonia Lake. And what I'd like to show you is how we pick this thing and what kind of characteristics we look for. The point I want to make is we chose this thing based on the science of this piece of property. And what we found out was if you ask people what they want in open space, there's absolutely no end to the number that they will pick. If you Google it, you get 10,000 definitions. What we ended up saying is these we think are good science-based characteristics of any piece of property. And leading the parade is drinking water quality and quantity. This is one of the key characteristics of this property. Secondly, access to public water usage. The public doesn't really have much access other than the McCooks and the boat landing. They just don't have it. If it's farmland, we'd like to protect that. And actually, there's some small plot, but it's a good 10-acre hayfield on this piece of property. Active and passive recreation, it's both on this property. There's plenty of walking trails, but even more, I'll tell you in a minute what the other characteristics are. A forest block and greenway, intuitively this. We decided that 100 acres contiguous property is worth far more than 100 one-acre properties or 200 quarter-acre, half-acre properties. Unique geological features when we look at land. If there is a splendid view or a splendid rock formation, you know what? Let's save it for the beauty. We don't have to be utilitarian all the time. Cultural, historic. This, by the way, is how Samuel Smith House is argued for. And finally, biodiversity. The essence of biodiversity by E.E. Wilson from Harvard will tell you this. You need the land. Once you get the land, then you get the bugs and the birds and everything else that comes with it. So now, what I want to show you then is this piece of property got turned this way. And I'll give you the characteristic. The yellow is the Hathaway property, 120 acres. Actually, it's never been surveyed until we got involved in this thing. This came from King George. They've been in the Hathaway family for a number of generations. One of the outstanding characteristics of this thing, there's 3,000 feet on the water. 3,000 feet of waterfront. That's almost unheard of. When you hear that, you just stop and pause and say, buy it, no matter what it has. It has a very interesting forest situation. Forest here is only seen in about 10% of the forests in the state of Connecticut. That is a truly mature forest. It hasn't been logged in over 100 years. You walk on it, there's oak trees 2.5 feet in diameter. And speaking about walking on it, there's very nice woods roads on it that lend itself to walking. There's also a freshwater marsh, which was very intriguing to the deep bird people. This is a key piece of marsh for migrating birds. And the secret of it is it's open. The birds can land. It's not a wetland with trees all over the place. Approximately 50% of this is directly over an aquifer, which lends you to believe that it has the potential to be a future well site, if needed, okay? And it's this group of properties ends up to being about a 250-acre preserve. All right, so it satisfies a lot of those characteristics that we think are very important. A little bit background, why are we here? Up until this year, deep, if we put a proposal into deep, and it was a good one, you could expect anywhere between 60 and 65% of the yellow book value. You could receive that much. 4 weeks before we were to receive our dividend, we got a letter from Deep and said they just changed the rules. It's more like they put a maximum of $400,000, which turns out to be about 22% of the book value of this piece of property. And we're not the only land trust in the state that face this. This is for everybody, all right? Well, that's what we have to really start maneuvering. One of the arguments that I want to cover and get it out of the way if I can is you're taking land off the tax rolls and therefore the taxes are going to go up. That's really the opposite of what really happens. Cost of community services, which is an analytical computational scheme that economists have developed, which has been applied to about 8 towns our size in Connecticut. For every tax dollar that you and I put in, we get back about $1.15 in total services. So on the contrary, open space reduces your tax burden. We're going to be talking about on the order of maybe $900,000, $1 million, not sure yet. But if you look at that at 2% money in 20 years with the number of tax-paying units we have, that ends up to be about $5 a year for 20 years. It's interesting. I can't almost think of anything you can buy for $5 anymore. And we must prove to Deep that we can fund this thing, because we can't hold off for a year or two, and then they're going to say, give us the money back, you obviously can't take care of this thing. Okay? I think that summarizes why we need this thing, and you're certainly intimately familiar with the background. Are there any questions? Okay.
Do have
Yes.
one. First, I just have to underscore much of what you said as being something that this group has talked about the importance of on several occasions. And we did know that it was the top of the open space plan chart. But I was looking at the map and just wanted to get clear on the acreage. So the open space plan, I believe it is in need of a little bit of update on acreage.
Yes.
And it looks like we've preserved some of it already. So it was initially a 152-acre piece of property. And
Yes.
what's the remaining
Well,
left
what we
to be
had to
preserved?
do was, one of the owners retained this thing. This is about 20 acres,
Okay.
okay? And that had never been surveyed, so that was a guesstimate.
Okay.
And you put all that together and you end up with this value. For example, here's the Yale property. Nobody believes, including the surveyor, that that's actually the property, so they drew a line across it. But 120 is pretty close to what's
Got
there.
it. Okay. So the original may have been around 152, and they are offering the town 120
Yes,
of that.
that's the price, and
Yep.
that's what they were offering.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Is there any? Okay.
Okay, so you're looking for the commission to give a letter of endorsement to the plan?
Exactly.
Okay.
And I've been to the Parks and Rec. I've been to the inland wetlands. You're the third group. Both Parks and Rec and inland wetlands were in favor of the project.
Great.
And you almost have to be. There is
Right.
This is an easy
Right.
thing to reach a conclusion on.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you very much, Mr. Carlson.
Thank you.
That was very interesting and, yeah, exciting. Thank you.
Thank
So you want a vote to get direction for drafting a memo? Would that be?
A motion or a consensus?
I think a consensus would probably be fine, right? Right, okay, Mr. Geisha, would you please draft a letter stating our approval and endorsement of the plan?
Can it be very enthusiastic?
Yes. Thank you. All right, so let's move on, and next on the agenda is a call for public delegations. Is there anyone here wishing to speak at public delegations this evening? Okay, seeing none, let's move on. Communications, Mr. Gaishel.
Communication at this time.
All right, thank you. And did we have a zoning representative at the last zoning meeting?
No, like, one of our members was part of the zoning.
Okay.
Typically that was actually.
I was August.
All right, so that brings us to ex officio, Mr. Salerno.
Good evening, everyone. Just a quick update. I know you guys met on the POCD. I mentioned to the Board of Selectmen that you guys were working something. I didn't elaborate, so I figured I'd let you guys make your presentation. At the last meeting, we did approve and move to the Board of Finance a bunch of items for the American Rescue Plan funds. $54,000 for Ledgely Health District. They're asking for 1% of everyone's ARP funds to help fund obvious programs. Same thing with the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments. That was $9,000. That was a kind of agreed upon number between all the municipalities to help fund some of their extra costs that were burdened on them and will continue to burden them. COVID. We approved $25,000 for East Lyme Giving Guard. If you haven't been there or seen it, I would recommend it. They're doing a really good job there to provide food, fresh food, to people in need. They need some startup money to help get going. So we are providing that. $12,500 to Save the River, Save the Hills. That's primarily to help with the pump out boat. There's been a lot of increase in traffic because of COVID. We don't want that going into the river. Town clerk, $7,500. That is to digitize some of our old records. We're going to digitize all the way back, I believe, to the founding of the town. So that's a very important thing, especially during real estate transactions. COVID, when people weren't able to come here, now they can get it. American Legion, $13,900, and VFW, $9,000. They did lose a lot of revenue last year due to COVID. They do have some needs, so we are providing that. And then $2,000 for the London Homeless Hospitality Center. That's been approved by Board of Selectmen. We'll go to Board of Finance, and that passes there. That'll go to town meeting. I don't have anything else. I do apologize. I do have to jet out of early. Kid duties. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Salerno. All right. Subcommittees. Michelle, would you care to speak to that?
Sure, we just met to finalize the list of recommendations that we'll be supplying to the Board of Selectmen via correspondence of projects that are outlined and supported by the POCD, which meet the is it American Rescue or American Relief? I'm saying it both ways all the time.
I've been saying American
Rescue,
Rescue.
okay. So projects that fit the qualifications for town spend of the American Rescue Funds. So that will be headed to the Board of Selectmen imminently. Thank you, everyone, for your work on that.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. And I have nothing to add as chairman. Do I hear a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from August 10th?
So moved.
Thank you, Rich and Larry. Any discussion, corrections? All in favor of approving the regular meeting minutes from August 10th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Let the record show 600 approval of the meeting minutes. And that brings us to public hearings, which there are none tonight. Subdivisions and re-subdivisions pending. We have item A, application of Kristen Clark, PE, applicant, Cold Spring Lot Management LLC owner for an 8-lot subdivision of property located at 121 Upper Patagonia Road, East Lyme, Assessor's Map 30.5.0, Lot 44. Mr. Gaishel, you have any?
Attorney Garrity is here tonight representing applicants. I'll just tell you briefly, application. You have 65 days to render a decision on this application. That's straight, standard subdivision. There's no public hearing required under the threshold for one. With that said, I can turn it over to Attorney Garrity. We are awaiting a review by town staff, Light, and the town engineer. So as soon as we receive those items, we can move forward with the decision. In the meantime, Gary with the presentation.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, at the outset, as Mr. Gaishel noted, this doesn't require a public hearing. It is the property was originally configured in its current formation. It's about 75 acres back in the 1930s when it was deeded to the Girl Scouts, and has remained in that same mode ever since. So if you look at the map we have here, the area in the hash marks on this side is the area of the proposed development. It's phase 5 of the Nottingham Hills subdivision. And I turn the page. What we are proposing, honestly, I should say we were at Wetlands last night, and they are going to conduct a public hearing early October, I think October 4th.
No, we're looking at the.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Oh,
There's a better picture to look at than me, so. So we're, as I was saying, we were at Wetlands last night. They decided that they wanted to have a public hearing on it, which is fine, and that will be held October 4th. We acquired the contract purchase rights to this a few months back. Originally, Mr. Dravik, who's Cold Spring, was proposing 12 lots to it. We have reduced it to 8 lots because we think, from a development standpoint, that makes more sense. These are all street frontage lots. There would be 3 common driveways for the 8 lots. The remaining 49 acres of the Girl Scout camp would remain undeveloped. And the intent there is to keep it as a campground. So if we look at the configuration, there are 4 lots, excuse me, 5 lots down in the what would be the southerly portion of it, and 3 lots in the northerly portion of the property. The inland wetlands, there are 2 wetland areas on here. If I float back to this design, one of the wetlands is over here. This actual watershed does not drain towards the property. The other watershed, and you'll see the wetland down here towards the road. If I can, this is the area that essentially what you see on here. You see area A, which is this larger area that drains in this direction, and then area B drains towards the south in that direction. What our engineer has proposed, and it was part of the reason for reducing the lot size, is we're going to proposing a biofilter. Easier if I show you where lots are. In this area up here. Right now, currently, the water drains towards the road, and a substantial portion of the water drains down the existing access way to the Girl Scout camp. There are some buildings here in this area, and then some campsites up here, and then you can see this building right here, which is a cafeteria / meeting area that the Girl Scouts use. The idea behind the biofilter is to trap this water. There would be some swales developed on the site to channel all the water into the biofilter, and the biofilter would then hold the water in place, allow the fines and any debris in there to settle. If at any point there was a storm of enough magnitude, it has an overflow that sends it down that, but it would down to the wetland, and it would go into the wetland, but it would be cleaner. And in fact, based on that design, we have a 25% reduction in the actual sheet flow or water runoff that on the site, since we're by going into the biofilter, a lot of it's going to be retained and absorbed into the ground. There isn't an open space requirement on this. As you may recall, when we were doing some of the re-subdivision on what was phase 3, we had presented to you, and I intend to submit a sort of an outline of that with that, but I sent a letter in January this year, so I'm not sure, Mr. Gaishel, if that's in this file because the application hadn't been filed just yet. but there's 70 acres of open space in the subdivision itself. And we have a memorandum from the then town's council regarding that, saying that that would be sufficient in terms of this development, so that we don't have to create any additional open space. But keeping in mind, too, that the campground is intended to remain, the 49 acres there is intended to remain as a campground and essentially undisturbed. As Mr. Gaishel noted, Ledgelight, we are still waiting a review from Ledgelight on this. The drainage reports were submitted last week, and we're waiting for the town engineer. I was unable to get both my surveyor and my drainage report and the wetlands expert here tonight, simply for timing purposes, so we would intend to bring them at the next public hearing, or I shouldn't say public hearing, but at the next hearing that the board would continue this to. And obviously, as I said to Mr. Gaishel earlier, in terms of the dates and so forth on that, we can be flexible if a little bit more time is needed in order to consider that, or consider staff reports. The archaeological survey has been submitted to the state, and we're awaiting a response on that. There are no road constructions or improvements proposed. As I said, there are going to be the 3 driveways. There is a swale that the town installed just to the north of this driveway, or excuse me, the existing access way down to, and that drains into an existing pipe under the road. I would point out that this whole parcel, including the road and the area on Patagonia Lake, is all owned by Cold Spring Management. It's all part of the proposed sale. Historically, the road, it was not deeded to the town. It's created by public use, and so it's essentially a right-of-way over the existing land on there. There are no construction activities either proposed. The lots themselves are going to have rain gardens on there to channel or funnel the runoff from the roof and impervious surfaces into the rain gardens on the lots themselves, so they're not going to be discharging anything additional down towards the street. One of the concerns or issues that was raised by wetlands is, putting something in the deeds in terms of the cutting on here, because they were concerned about people maybe wanted to clear cut right down to the lake. Obviously, since this property is going to be retained by the developer, who's going to retain this portion, we can prohibit clear cutting on the lakeside, or any cutting on the lakeside. And I spoke with the clients today, and they are amenable to putting restrictions in the deeds to limit the scope of the clearing to what is shown on the plans themselves, and to limit essentially any cutting of large trees and so forth, other than what might be required for maintenance or safety on that. And that was what I spoke with them in regards to some of the comments or questions that the Wetlands Commission had on that. I don't know if there are any questions from the commission at this point.
Can you repeat what you said about the road being on a right-of-way, or like?
Sure. So when we did the title search on the property, we went back to, I think it was about 1903, to make sure that we had a historical search done, not just like what they refer to as a 40-year search, which says within the last 40 years somebody's had good title to this property. So the road, when it was created, so there's 3 or 4 different ways you can create roads through the town. One of them is by a fee. Like in a subdivision, you'll see that the developer will actually deed the street to the town. Most of the roads that we see in these areas are created either by the selectmen or whomever, whatever they were called back in the day, laying out street lines and so forth. Also, though, a lot of the roads were created simply by the public using them. So the public has a right-of-way over the street. That is in the deed. When it was conveyed to the Girl Scouts, it said, subject to the public's right to travel over Upper Patagonia Road, or Patagonia Road, on that. But it wasn't the fee. So it was only sort of an issue with respect to the improvements that the town made over here in cutting the swale and so forth in, because they had done it on our client's property, or Mr. Dravik's property, Cold Spring Harbor, or Cold Spring Management, excuse me. I don't think there's any issues there, but it was just something that came up in that we submitted that to the wetlands last night, because we didn't want anybody to think that we had made these improvements or drainage swales into the property. They were just done. But again, with respect to any concerns, there's obviously no concern in terms of barring the public or anything from that. They have a right to pass and repass over the road. That's a given. So.
I do have a comment in regards to that. Section 6-10-7 of our regs indicates a minimum of 25-foot right-of-way from the center line of the existing street shall be provided along the frontage of the land to be subdivided. Where subdividing borders or increases the traffic on an existing street which is not conforming to the town street standards or which is otherwise in need of improvement, and where the proposed development increases the need for improvement on the street or intersection, the commission may require the applicant to improve the existing street or intersection to the extent that the need for such improvements or widening results from the increased traffic generation of the subdivision on such streets or intersections to the extent necessary to provide safe and adequate access to any subdivision. The beach area, which is also noted on the plan as a second parcel, or parcel 2, I think if you go back to the sheets, that was, so I would say that if you're dividing the land, it would be that 25-foot strip would need to be provided on both sides, and then the town would then have the fee to the right of way.
So you're talking a 50-foot from the center line of the street.
25 feet from the center line of the existing street on both sides, totaling 50 feet.
Right. And I don't know from looking at this, and I don't have a scale to see how wide the road is. It's probably 30, 35 feet in width in that location.
I think you should look at that. And then the other issue or question that I have is in regards to the open space, that while it's now being called part of Phase 5, the parcel was never initially proposed conceptually during the applications of those previous phases. So bringing it in now and saying it's not subject to the sufficient open space that was previously dedicated, I would argue that the open space was never dedicated as a result of this dividing of this piece. I mean, it's never been divided. It's been in configuration since the 1930s. It doesn't even abut the land that was previously subdivided.
Well, and I can submit our memorandum and position on it with the documents from the prior town council, but the Phase 3, as I understand it, was, and I wasn't involved in the original subdivision application on that, so I'm not 100% sure, but I was involved in the transfer to the department, well, to the East Lyme Land Trust of that, had to go through the title with the DEP for that, and my understanding is that a good portion of the Phase 4, I believe it was not part of the original subdivision application either. That was compiled from a series of parcels after they did Phase 1.
Phase 4 was a zoning review. That was never proposed for subdivision, that lot. There's a lot in there that I think Mr. Gonzalez subdivided.
Well,
but
okay.
My understanding is zoning approved a affordable housing development parcel.
I know they approved that in part, and I don't mean to be arguing, and I'd have to go back and look. Right.
Clarification as to how, and I understanding how that the open space
Sure.
was previously dedicated is somehow related to this parcel. that this parcel is not subject to the 10% or the 30% under CED.
All right, and I'm happy to provide the backup for that as to how we reach that conclusion.
Thank you. Those are the only comments that I had initially, and again, waiting on the stormwater report from the town engineer. That my only concern there is assuming that the biofilter is large enough to accommodate, and obviously as we've heard, is a 25% reduction in the runoff, is just the maintenance of that structure. It's going to remain on a large 42 acres.
The 49 acres, and that's going to be, and that would end up being, continue to be owned by the developer at that point in time.
So maybe just an operation and maintenance plan for that structure. I will say, as was reported to the wetland agency, the structure is supposed to be designed so that it's low maintenance. Probably would be maintenance once every 20 years type of thing. So I think that's what the intent of the we have them submit an operations maintenance plan.
All right. Yeah, we can do that. It's not a problem.
Totally adequate. Oh, the other, I have one other matter, but it's on the naming and the title block. It's more of a, I gotta check the statutes.
Okay.
The preparation of the plan itself. JP's not here. I was gonna ask him regarding, it's a, I think it said in the notes of the survey, property boundary survey, and versus the perimeter, sorry, it's a perimeter survey which is done to accuracy of A2. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the stuff on the interior is 100% accurate. That's how it was kind of explained to me. That's something I need to look into. It's not a big deal. It's really basically just, okay, it's a perimeter survey versus a subdivision plan. At some point, I think it may need to be titled and be prepared as a subdivision plan.
Okay, so if I understand, I just want to understand your comment.
It's really, it's having to do with the preparation of plans for subdivision
Okay.
versus just a property survey for a private homeowner type of a thing. And there's a standard in the statutes that talks about the difference between a property survey, a subdivision. And when I was looking at that today, matter of fact, I think it's with me. Department of Consumer Protection, minimum standards of accuracy, content, and certification for survey.
Okay.
And it's virtually the same. I think when I looked at the criteria for both a subdivision and a property perimeter survey, that they're nearly the same. I think it's just literally changing the title block, my interpretation of it.
Okay.
But
I'll review that as well
we can
too.
take a look
Sure.
and clarify that, see if we can probably answer that.
Yeah.
That's all I have at this time.
I do have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yep.
I also have some concerns about the open space being already, this to me is a new subdivision application, even if it's adjacent to one that the developer already owns. But I had a question about your statement on 25% reduction in runoff because of this swale in the biofilter. Are you saying a reduction in, you mentioned current runoff, which I'm familiar with the property and I understand what you were describing. When you say 25% reduction, are you talking about a 25% reduction in the current runoff or in what would be running off as if developed as proposed?
Developed as proposed. So there's no net increase in the, and that's the requirement, there can't be a net increase in the runoff. And based on the design plans using the biofilter, the swales, and the rain gardens, we would reduce the runoff post-development by 25% from what the current runoff is. If that.
Okay, so let me just state that back to you to make sure I understand. As proposed, this biofilter, the swale, would reduce runoff 25% by current levels. From current levels.
From current levels. Right.
Okay. Current undeveloped.
Yeah. So right now, if there's 100 gallons of runoff per hour,
Yep.
post-construction there will only be 75.
All right. Got that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have to do the math. It's easier for me to conceptualize it.
I appreciate that. And then just as a like housekeeping matter, it doesn't look like we have these site plans. We have kind of one that designates the acreage, but nothing to this level of detail. No like house
So,
placement or anything like
That's
that.
a housekeeping.
Okay.
I raised that issue this morning with Jen, and I think she was out last week when some of the plans came in. The earlier plans were submitted, but the actual subdivisions, there were revisions to because the engineer looked at this, and then when he came up and said, we should do a biofilter instead, as opposed to keeping with the design that Mr. Drabick's engineer had.
Okay. You mentioned feedback from wetlands and the possibility of prohibiting property owners from cutting on the lakeside, but I am not aware of anything we can do to prevent property owners from cutting down trees on their property once they own it. How would that be enforced, or
It's not easy to enforce, candidly. Other homeowners can. I have a subdivision that's a frontage subdivision like this, and we have restrictions against everybody, but if you don't do it within a certain period of time, you waive it. So if somebody puts a shed too close to wherever, and I don't complain or do something about it right away. But what we were proposing based on what Wetlands had asked is there are limits of clearing on the plans themselves right now. So we would limit the clearing area to that's what's shown on the plans, and then in the deeds we could put some restrictions in there that say you can't, obviously people may want to clear the underbrush out and so forth, but require them to leave trees over a certain size, which would frankly be more likely to happen, but it does get difficulty enforcing. I don't know whether we'd want to put something in there that gave the town the right to enforce it, and I'm not sure the town wants the obligation to enforce it either, because that becomes a headache for the town. But we try and do, and the other thing in terms of like with the rain gardens on the property, we've had maintenance agreements, and if you may recall from the last one over on Kensington, when we were proposing the rain garden, we had a maintenance agreement because it was a common rain garden for those, and you can have that. We could do some things along those lines to try and limit it, but we'll also provide them with the Deep's guidebook on rain gardens and maintenance and things like that. And again, it's ultimately up to the owners to really abide by that.
Well, that's what I'm concerned about, because I feel like we've gotten into this in the past, in hindsight, before many of us were, just over decades, right? Which is why I asked this question. And, candidly, sometimes things like this come and these ideas are proposed and they seem like a good solution at the time, but then over time, exactly what we were trying to prevent ends up happening anyway. And I'm wondering if there's another solution involving the management company retaining frontage on that side of the property line as well, just in the way that you plan to retain the lakeside property to protect not only from runoff and water quality, but that kind of scenic road that is forested at the moment.
The problem is if we retain frontage, then the homes don't have frontage, and we can't meet the subdivision regulations.
Yeah.
It is a conundrum that everyone faces, and I think the best thing that we can say is we can try and educate the consumer or the homeowner of that. It is also, and I can discuss this with my client, whether we could put a conservation easement on a certain strip in the front to maintain the street view from that. I've done that in the past. I've been on commissions where we've required that, and it's worked generally pretty good.
I hadn't thought about that.
I guess the question I'm eager to answer is this a conventional subdivision or under our regulations, the
CDC.
So if it's under as a conservation development by design, and while Mr. Mulholland has said okay and signed off on this in regard to his comment was existing use is legal, pre-existing, non-conforming. Can't think of the word. Something, however, the subdivision or reduction in overall lot area for the existing use campground does not exacerbate the non-conformity. Therefore, I'm signing off on the proposal. So while he made those comments, I would point to the zoning regs, like point to the CBD and the need for buffers or not. And obviously, it's not an open and green landscape, so those CBD regs require potentially up to 200-foot deep no buffer.
Thank you for that clarification.
So there may be a need for a easement of some sort, but a 200-foot deep buffer would then shift those 180 foot back. Take a look at that section of the zoning regs as it pertains to CBD and see how this would fit. The other portion of that is there's a 40-foot buffer along the perimeter. In this case, the remaining lot, the large 45 acres, is in the same configuration. So a 40-foot buffer around the perimeter would really, I don't know, if you just maintain a 40-foot buffer. Setback in the
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? So we're looking for staff reviews and some other reports, and some clarifications on some items. And our timeline is still good. We have a regular meeting. We'll still be,
I believe our regular meeting, we still should have you within the time frame. I think October 18th is when 65 days is up. Our meeting is, I believe, October 13th.
Right. And I did indicate to Mr. Gaishel that if we need time or an extension for hearing purposes and so forth, that's not going to be a problem.
October 12th. I think the expiration is the 13th.
Plenty of time.
But as
And that's a Friday, right, the 13th? Yeah.
At the end of the day, we still have to wait before we render a decision for the report from the wetland agency.
Right.
As you know, that report typically comes in the form of permit. And add comments like that if you want. So I would just recommend table discussion.
agreed.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all in person for once. Have a good night.
Surveyors don't have it.
Okay, so on to item B, application of Roxbury Road LLC, care of Mel Weiss, for 5-lot subdivision of property located at Roxbury Road, East Lyme Assessor's Map 16.1, Lot 43-1. Mr. Gaishel, you want to get us started on this?
Okay, 5-lot subdivision, again, this is just a subdivision of land, not a use sub, being under the 10-lot threshold, requirements for a public hearing. I had received last minute from our town engineer an email regarding his review, and I'll read that just for the record, but I don't have any other written comments into the record, and a copy of that email is not in the file as of yet, but,
I do have a paper copy of that if you want, Gary.
okay. From Alex Close to Gary Gaishel, CC Mel Weiss and Carl Albert, subject regarding Roxbury Road subdivision, Mel Weiss, Tuesday, September 14, 2021. Gary, the revised plan, the calculation address, and satisfying comments as discussed with Mr. Albert. Please let me know if you need to discuss with me further. Prior to the meeting, it looks like the chambers are on lots 3 and 5, not 4 and 5, just the alley. So if you need something additional from town engineer, I'd be happy to put it on letterhead in writing, just due to time constraints. Be submitted as quickly as possible. That said, we have from our water sewer, there's no comments from Mr. Carl. And those are the only 2 comments that I have from town staff. Did you hear back from Mr. Mulholland?
I have not heard from Mr. Mulholland, no.
So I'll follow up with Mr. Mulholland, being that we are still awaiting our memo from the Resident Health District. They want to proceed with caution. Again, we have 65 days to render a decision on the application, bringing us to April 13th. Our next meeting is the day prior, so we can certainly table discussion. In the meantime, Mr. Roberts here to explain the overall subdivision. From there.
Okay. My name's Kyle Hobbert. I'm from CLA Engineers in Norwich. Here on behalf of the property owner, Roxbury Road LLC. It's Mel Weiss is the owner. The property we're talking about today is map 16.1, lot 43-1. It doesn't have a street address, but it's on Roxbury Road, essentially across from the town transfer station. This is the driveway to the town transfer station right there, and this is the subject property right here. The total acreage is 8.61 acres. It's in the RU40 zone. The owner is proposing a 5-lot residential conservation subdivision. There will be 5 lots. 2 of the lots are frontage. Lots 1 and lot 2 will front directly onto Roxbury Road. Lots 3, 4, 5 will have a common driveway to the rear lots. With that, 2.94 acres will be set aside as open space. This open space will basically surround the east and southern boundary of the property. That open space meets the subdivision requirements for a percentage. It's about 34% of the property set aside. It also meets the requirements for the slopes and wetland percentages within the open space. The intent of the open space is to leave it in its natural state. It borders a large 52-acre wetland system to the south of this property. So the intent is to leave that natural and leave the upland habitat and the edge of the wetlands undisturbed and preserved. The owner is proposing to turn the open space over to the homeowners association for preservation. The lots will be served by municipal water. There is a water main in Roxbury Road, so they'll be served by municipal water. They will be served by on-site septic systems, and Ledgelight has given the verbal approval for the lots. Mr. Weiss has prepped several of the lots for the septic systems in coordination with Danielle Holmes from Ledgelight Health District, and she has given the verbal okay that all of the lots in the design are suitable for subdivision. Stormwater from the site, in general, the site flows from Roxbury Road south to the wetland system back there. Stormwater will be managed with a variety of overland flow, grass swales, and rain gardens within the development. There are no catch basins. There's no road associated with this. There's no point discharge proposed as part of this development. The stormwater design meets the water quality goals in your subdivision regs, as well as the MS4 requirements and the Connecticut DEEP requirements. It also meets reduces the peak flow from the site from the existing condition. It also reduces the runoff volume from the site from the existing condition. So essentially, it takes the stormwater and infiltrates it back into the ground, as opposed to letting it run overflowed. The wetlands, as I noted, are primarily located along the eastern side and southern portion of the property. We've maintained a 100-foot buffer from those wetlands as part of the design, and the Inland Wetland Commission approved the design in January 2020. So it has gone through there and has been approved. The total disturbance for the development is about 4.6 acres in total. As part of the subdivision plans, as part of the design, we've shown erosion and sedimentation control measures to be installed. They are consistent with the Connecticut DEEP ENS guidelines. In general, it will be surrounded, a perimeter of silt fence will surround the property. It's installed now, actually, and has been in good condition through the numerous storms that we've had recently. At each driveway, as the lots are developed, stone anti-tracking pads will be installed to limit any migration of fines into the town roads. Stockpile and staging areas have been located on the site. Any of those will be surrounded by silt fence or hay bales during construction. We've also provided there's several areas of 3-to-1 slopes where those are encountered and proposed. We'll protect those slopes with erosion control matting and topsoil and seed to prevent erosion of those slopes. Essentially, that's the proposed development. If there's any questions.
Is there a detail in the plans for that matting?
Yes, there is. Yes, on the ENS sheet, there's a detail for the matting.
I'll check with Alex. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is after what I've seen around town on some of the existing projects, we're looking at doing these permanent turf mats, heavy duty, or stone. It may just be a better option to do stone versus trying to get vegetation. I mean, obviously, I prefer vegetation instead of using. So
We do specify the matting and an actual product, and it's the North American green product that we do specify that holds up to some flows, and as well as we'll maintain the slopes.
There's a permanent mat, which has roughly a 5-year lifespan. My other question was, there's an existing stockpile of topsoil to the west of the site. Right here. That's a lone pile, but there was another just topsoil stockpile closer to the road. I think it's on the flat portion. We talked about it previously.
Up in this area?
To your left. South, yeah,
Right. Oh, this piece over here, yes. Yeah.
Right. There is in fact a stockpile out there currently. Okay, and it's on the flat portion, which is above and beyond the 100-foot upland area?
Yes.
For the record, thank you. I only asked because it was questioned as to where the location was. I don't see it on the map, so I'm just clarifying that it is outside the 100-foot upland review, at which time that was the regulations in which the inland wetland agency reviewed this plan versus the 300-foot upland, which came subsequent to their application. Currently, all of the questions and comments that I have.
Michelle?
Yeah, I was just hoping you could clarify one thing on the site map for me and then walk me through like a timeline logistic. So I'm looking at the entire parcel here, but you're just subdividing a piece of it, and that's to my left, to the west. That is
Over here?
Is that? Can you
That-
walk me through what's open space and what's just not going to be developed, or?
This is a separate property.
Okay.
Off here. That's a totally separate property. So the open space will be this portion right here, and then runs all the way up to Roxbury Road. This entire piece right here.
Okay, and so our discussion just now on the topsoil, it's on the other property.
Correct. It's
Just
under
another-
same ownership.
Same ownership.
Both parcels are under same
Okay,
ownership. Yes.
great,
Yeah.
excellent, thank you. And you mentioned that this plan received January 2020 inland wetland approval, and I believe this is the first time this commission is seeing it,
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and you also mentioned that the silt fence had already been installed, and my recollection, just kind of having driven by this area, is there already site work being conducted to this? I mean, are these driveways put in?
This shared common driveway is roughly boxed in now. To get approval from Ledge-Lite Health District, the owner had to prepare a couple of sites for the septic systems, essentially do some excavation, bring in septic sand and fill to a certain elevation. In preparation of that, the Lot 5 septic area, Lot 1 septic area, and I believe part of 3 and 4 were all prepared as part of the Ledge-Lite review and approval process. Prior to site disturbance and after we got the wetlands approval, the silt fence was installed along the perimeter as planned to protect the wetlands from any potential sedimentation as part of that preparation process.
Thank you. And Gary, can you educate me as to whether or not this is typical? I mean, usually when we're seeing a lot, it's like the site work then has to be done.
Correct.
Yeah.
So typically, you don't see any disturbance, and our regulations are specific to you can't cut and box the road in prior to your subdivision. In this particular case, they have to get access to cut their sites, because in order for Ledge-Lite to approve the site, they need to access it. So if they came forward and asked for their subdivision approval just to get access so they could prep sites, we then would be approving a plan that didn't have, or wasn't code compliant with the health code. So we'd be kind of throwing, hey, we got to go approve. So we don't want to approve lots before we know that they can support the septic system.
Right.
So yes, and I did comment to the landowner that I thought it was an extensive amount of work going on. Their response was that there's an extensive amount of rock. So the reason the sites that are having to be prepped is the depth to bedrock. Not so much groundwater, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. There's sporadic shallow bedrock throughout here.
So in gaining access, that was the least intrusive. It's coming through that space. And the time was compliant with the regulations.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, both of you.
No other comments, questions? So we have, you said till the 13th of next month, and we have a number of items still outstanding?
Correct.
Okay.
As in the previous application, right, we mentioned buffers. I have to take a look at that. And although I do believe Mr. Mulholland indicated he was, he was okay. I apologize. I left him out. He just wrote okay as far as comments goes, so if you want to follow up with that, or limited comments.
I would take it for what it is.
My own evaluation of lots, it looks like they're all compliant. Regard would be just the buffer requirement to the abutting parcels, the land being subdivided, which is in the same ownership as. So if you think, right, the open space which abuts the neighboring parcel is well over 40 foot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you don't have an issue on that side, so like maybe on lot one, where it abuts the existing residential lot.
There is a 40-foot, this green here is in excess of 40 feet, yes.
And then the other lot, which is owned by the same ownership, you could easily put a 40-foot buffer in.
Yep.
If need be.
What's on the other side of the little strip at the top, right? That kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
right there.
On this side,
The other side.
this side?
Yeah.
That's another residential property.
Oh.
There's a house here and here.
That's awkward,
There's
huh?
actually a piece, yeah, this entire parcel has an access strip between the two neighboring properties.
And as you heard, the applicant's going to propose the open space to their homeowners association. And, you know, we talk about access, public access. And my opinion is that the total acreage here, available land for public recreational use is limited. The association is suitable for them to use in their backyard. It does provide the buffer to the wetland and for the wetland protection over that portion, so it does make some sense. And if the town were to have public access, there is potential.
Yep.
To ask the question, would it be feasible to make a condition of approval that we work with Gary to make sure that the buffers are suitable to meet the regulations?
I think that would be part of the process.
I would think if necessary, we could condition something like that. If we're going to wait for formal written, and I think it behooves us to wait for the formal written response from Where's Light. I too did talk to David Holmes, the sanitarian. She did indicate that the lots were compliant. She had to draft the memo. So we are waiting on that. And again, the town engineer's report, which if you wanted formalized on letterhead, we can do that too. Again, but you did hear from him in his email. Detailed discussion, we can address and revise the plan if need be to add it and note the buffer. Condition. The other item would be that we figure out the appropriate bond estimate for road and sanitation controls. There are no proposed public improvements. No need for a public improvement bond. But certainly, there's no proposed clearing in the right of way. The sight lines are suitable.
There is some clearing in the right-of-way for sightlines.
So we would probably add that into the bond estimate. So that would be the only public improvement. In the town right of way, correct? Yeah.
I believe you'd be correct on that, and again, if feasible, we could make that a condition that we, with your and the town engineer's approval, you know, we provide the estimate, and with your.
We would just accept the bond, post it, and then the work would get done. We'd report that the work's done, and then the commission would release the funds. That's how it works. But,
We would be happy to work with staff prior filing Mylars, we can come to an agreement on that bond estimate.
I think it would be good to formalize those and the reports from town staff also, just so that there's a permanent record, other than a verbal okay or whatever. I think it would be smart, just for everybody's, interest.
It protects the applicant's interest as
Yep.
well.
So there's no question about what happened.
But I think overall, the plan is meeting regulations.
All right, anyone else have any thoughts, comments? Okay, so I think we'll table this pending all the things that we just spoke about.
The formalizing the report from staff, talking about the buffer and how.
Sure. Yep.
Maybe mark out the bond estimate ahead of time, so it's all good to go. We have to draft the language for the commission to consider.
Yeah,
The findings.
yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Great.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that concludes our subdivisions and re-subdivisions. On to zoning referrals, which there are none. Municipal referrals, none. Old business. Affordable housing plan update. Okay, so we'll maintain that. Yeah,
To make some progress. I think, did I report that we were awarded $15,000?
I was wondering.
From
Great.
the Department of Housing for assistance in preparing that document.
Great.
oh, that's so good.
Yeah, well received.
So who will we reach out to for that assistance? We talked about the COG.
I will reach out to the COG to see what availability they may have, some of that assistance with that money. Otherwise, we could put an RFP together or ask for, solicit some proposals, and just see where some firms will come in.
Related to this, I know that, I'm not sure if it was the Board of Selectmen or zoning was determining whether or not we would exclude ourselves from the accessory units. What was the timeline on that?
January 1.
Okay, so have they taken any action?
Neither the zoning commission nor the board of selectmen have taken any action on it. In discussions with Mr. Mahone, he's indicated that the zoning commission plans to take it up, I think, next month, in October, and then forward in their decision on to the board of selectmen, who will hopefully take it up either in the second meeting in November or December. Talking with Mr. Mahone, he indicated the town attorney felt that his interpretation of the statute was that we would technically need to take action after January 1. Because the legislation technically is in effect to opt out. I'm going to leave it to the attorneys to iron that out. It's a little out of my control, but certainly I'll have a conversation with Mr. Zamarka.
Would that come to this commission as a zoning referral for adherence to the POCD? Alignment with the POCD?
My understanding is that it will not, although I feel that it probably should.
Yes.
You're opting out of legislation. What's interesting is there's not an existing regulation that permits them. So it's really not a regulation change.
Right.
We have permissive regs, so it's not listed, it's not permitted.
What would be the avenue for this commission to become involved in that discussion?
You would probably, you could reach out to, well, again, we might have a discussion with zoning or
Whoever decides, I guess.
I would say we could certainly reach out to the board of selectmen through Mark, and you just have an initial conversation with Mark and saying, hey, from our perspective, this is what it is, what the perspective is. I know, in efforts to meet with the zoning commission, maybe have some discussion with potential required going forward, we certainly believe that plan development is applicable in this case.
Are they going to do a subcommittee for it or anything, or?
I don't believe so. I believe the zoning commission was handling it as a regular meeting agenda item.
What do you think?
I don't know that I have enough bandwidth to chase after that one. So, if anyone has some ideas and inkling to get involved, that would be there's a good opportunity to do it.
From what I gather, the rumor is the sentiment is to opt out. Again, I don't know what the final decisions will be. Would it be so interesting if the zoning commission opted out and the board of selectmen did not? My understanding of the legislation is if the town takes no action, the legislation goes into effect and we then would be required. Could we opt out afterward? I think we could pass a resolution that is sufficient. Yeah, there's some legal questions there. You have to look around and let you better advise the commission that become involved.
Yeah, I'm just curious about like what this commission, how involved this commission outside of us as individuals would want to be, because it is something that is explicitly addressed in the POCD. So my thought was that we would want to bring that to the appropriate attention, but I'm wondering what this group thinks.
Well, they certainly have access to the POCD, and I would hope that if they're talking about that they would read our section that we put together for it. I mean, we might, maybe we...
But it doesn't even follow.
No, but
No.
whether or not they actually read it or not, that we don't know. We might just simply point it out that, hey, we do have a plan that has that addressed in it.
That's what I was wondering, if we wanted to do that in an official on-record capacity.
That seems like a reasonable thing to do. Say something like, as you guys are addressing this affordable housing stuff, note we do cover it in the POCD and have some.
I mean, we could just send correspondence on that on your behalf. You say, hey, please note the POCD as you consider this matter.
Yeah,
You know it's
maybe
coming.
even,
Yeah, to cite the pages or passage.
yeah, maybe highlight the fact that it's got some very interesting stuff, and it's not a long, awful thing to read. I don't know how you put it that way, you know, without, you know. You don't need a.
Yeah, I think you just say it. It's like, here's the POCD, this is what it says. I greatly appreciate, respect, your consideration of the following as you consider and deliberate
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
I think that's about the best we can do, because if they're not going to, if they did do a subcommittee, we could request to be part of it, even though we're not in there. I mean, they can put anybody on a subcommittee, can't they?
Right, they could have members at large, they can invite whoever.
Right, but if they're not going to do that, then our opportunity to get involved just, it's not really there other than correspondence.
Yeah.
Through town staff, right, I can write letters all day long as a town planner. You know, guys, this is what I think. And, you know, I'm sure there'll be a referral of some sort, I would think, but maybe not.
That sounds like a great idea. Could we potentially send that correspondence to both zoning and Board of Selectmen?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Awesome.
Communication is key.
So that would go under our communications next.
They'll have two communications.
Thank you for entertaining my question.
No, that was a good question, and that was a good idea. Better password. Okay, are we up to date with the affordable housing plan update? All right. And new business having none, which brings us to adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Thank you, Tom. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Rich. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Meeting adjourned at 2019. Thank you, everybody.